A cousin once removed, Tom Fisher, came up to visit us from California, and he brought along quite a few pictures that he's gathered doing family history. This is a picture of the church in England that he found on the wall of my grandfather's sister's house in Maine, and it's the parish of Newton Arlosh, and so it gave him a place to go search. You'll notice on the roof of the church in this old picture, which was probably brought over in the 1870s or even earlier than that, when my great-grandfather Harry came over, shows a dormer on the roof, and then when you see the color picture he took in England, that dormer is no longer on it. And here's the picture that Tom took when he was in England, and you can see there's a lot of people buried there, including some of our relatives. We'll see a gravestone from one of their graves. There was a wedding that took place here at the church while he was in England, and turned out there was quite a few relatives came to the wedding. It was some relative that was getting married. There's a guy over there named Peter Fisher who pretty much helped Tom locate and find everybody and introduced him to a lot of relatives. This was a more recent grave that was there in the churchyard of Henry Fisher of Newton Arlosh, who died May 3rd, it looks like 1901 or 1907, I can't tell which. This is a picture of Smyrna Mills, Maine today, where my dad was born and where my grandparents lived. This picture was quite a find. It's a pretty good-sized picture. It covered the whole ottoman, and it's blown up from a picture that's probably taken about 1870, maybe somewhere in 1880. It's hard to say. Let's see, my grandfather is the one on the extreme left holding the horse, and his brother Jim is standing next on the other side, to the right of the horses. Then his sister Minnie is seated, and she's hard to see here. His mother, Martha Crandall, is standing there with her hands folded. And then over a couple people, there's great-grandfather Harry Fisher sitting with his hands on his knees. And then in the buggy is Bird Fisher, another brother. And somewhere in there is Kit Fisher, his sister, but I can't remember where she is. And that's in front of their family home in Oakfield, Maine. And a close-up of the same picture, my Grandpa Joe on the left and his brother Jim on the right. And that's my great-grandfather Harry sitting there with his hands on his knees. And in the buggy, brothers, his sons, my grandpa's brothers, George on the left and Bird on the right. Bird spelled B-I-R-D. And yet another close-up of the same picture. This time we've got, let's see, the guy on the horse. I'm supposed to know who that is. I can't think of his name. He was the littlest, youngest brother. And then right in front of him is my great-grandmother, Martha Crandall. She was descended from the Crandalls that came on the Mayflower. And there's a whole slug of Crandalls all over Maine and Massachusetts. They're thicker than cranberries. Then between her and old Harry is some Crandall relatives, and we don't know who they are, the lady and the two children. No, wait a minute, the girl in front, no, we don't know who they are. The girl on the far left, you see part of her, that's Kit Fisher. She was one of my grandfather's sisters. These are the graves of my great-grandmother Martha Crandall Fisher's parents, still there in, I guess in Smyrna Mills, Maine. And this is a picture of the gravestone of Harry Fisher, my great-grandfather. Your great-great-grandfather died 1926, born in 1833, I believe that says. Okay, I'm getting better at this. From left to right here, we got Minnie and her daughter Merle on her lap. Minnie was my grandfather's sister. And then Minnie, Merle, and then Kit, my grandfather's other sister, sitting on the ground. And up there on the horse is Had, H-A-D. I think his name was really Harry. They called him Had. Here's my Grandpa Joe, Joseph Samuel Fisher, as a young whippersnapper. Here's my grandmother, Ada Alicia Matheson Fisher, at about the same age, around 20 years old. Here's a later picture of my grandmother Ada, and she's the one sitting on the right. And I don't remember her sister's name. Somebody probably knows them, but I don't. This is my Grandpa Joe's sister Kit, and I think it's kind of, if you look at the eyes and the eyebrows, there's quite a few in the family seem to have that look at times when they look a certain way. Even going down to Even, she looks like that sometimes when she gives you a look. This is an old picture of my grandpa when he was doing his blacksmith thing. He looks like he's probably about 30, somewhere in his 30s there. And this is my grandpa when he was, I imagine, probably about 60. Notice the resemblance to the actor Richard Farnsworth, who played in The Gray Fox. This is a picture of my dad when he was about 12. You've probably seen this one before. I think I've got it hanging on the wall here. And this is my dad again. He must have been, this is about the time he was living on the horse ranch, I suppose. He was still a teenager, and looking at his face, it looks as though it must have been after his eye had been kicked by the horse. And this rather morbid picture is my dad's sister, Pansy May, who died when she was about a year and a half old or 2 years old. So they took a picture of her in the coffin. And these are pictures of Pansy May's gravestone in Maine. Here's a picture of 4 generations. On the left, my great-grandfather Harry Fisher, and my grandfather Joseph Samuel Fisher, and his son Thomas Darrell, and the baby is Jack Fisher, his only child. Tom Fisher, that brought these pictures up, is Jack's son. He would be the 5th generation if he were in this picture, but he was a little too young. And here's my grandmother Ada when she was about 70. This is my Aunt Mabel and her mother. Mabel's was my Uncle Darrell's wife and Jack's mother. And her mother was named, well, they called her Shetty. Her real name was Eva, but they called her Shetty Sheldon. And she was kind of a wild and crazy old gal, and she was the one that came down to Idaho Falls and blew up the hillside looking for that cache of robbers' money. Supposedly the guy had died in her boarding house in Spokane and given her a map showing where it was buried. But that was one of her many exploits. Mabel, in her later years after Darrell died, she inherited quite a bit of money from Darrell, and then she had a good chum in Los Angeles who was the widow of a steamship company owner, and that gal died and left her a whole bunch of money. So in her last 20 years or so, she traveled all over the world doing all kinds of wild, exotic things. When she was 88, she was riding a mule to the pyramids in Egypt. So I guess she inherited a little bit of her mother's stuff. The Sheldons came originally, or were from Columbia Falls, and when Daryl met Mabel, I believe they lived in Columbia Falls. When Tom came up here, he found the family homestead and found other relatives, including this Mrs. Martin in Big Fork, who was granddaughter of Minnie Fisher. Well, that's the end of the show. Thank you very much.